and positive patient. Never been here, the restrooms are back this way. Here. So I would be cautious, both board members as well as conversations. So just kind of be aware of that. There are QR codes. I have no idea what's on the board's works, but the QR codes do have the agenda and the Wi-Fi back as well. And with that, I will turn it over to
Tommy Lewis. Here. Rick Fernandez. Zebra. Eleanor Quinn.
here.
Jenny Hill. Patty Miller. Here. Ian Shaw. Here. Rick Tish. Here. Marquis. Eddie Martin. Here.
So be aware of that. There is continuing education, and attendance of today's meeting will grant a total of 3 hours of CE. General credit. As QR code at the end that will. And with that, board members will go to B on the agenda. Both the executive committee meeting minutes that were held at our last board meeting from May 7th.
Board members, in the rule of PDFs, there are bookmarks, links to the lines with edits. And also, for the rules for adoption, you have received, there's just one, you have received copies of the orders and preambles in the OneDrive link that was sent to you. Also, you have them on your computers. So, for adoption today was proposed at the May 7th, 2024 board meeting, and it was published in the June 14th, 2024 issue of the Texas Register. So it's 1.1, 8169, and that regards automatic denial or revocation. And these two amendments simply clarify some paragraph lettering and correct grammatical errors. And the first one you'll see is on line 55, which adds an and to indicate that two requirements must be met. And line 57, which changes a or to a capital C, which makes it the third requirement. There were no comments received regarding this rule.
Donna has made a motion to adopt a second. Randy Martin is second.
C2.1 regards Rule 291.9, and that's concerning prescription pickup location. And what is being proposed, as far as open proposal, is a minor amendment that indicates that U.S. mail is an example of a common carrier under the board's rules. You'll see that on lines 10 through 11, it simply adds U.S. mail as an example. Next one, Madam President, is C.2.2, and this regards Rule 291.33 concerning community pharmacy or Class A's and operational standards. And this is regarding redistribution of donated prepackaged prescriptions regarding the records participants to a recipient, and those shall include, as you see on line 542, name, initials, or written or electronic signature of the prepack. And what we're doing here is simply adding the written or language to include both types of signatures. And this is to be consistent with the statutory language of section 442.0515 of the Texas Health and Safety Code that lays out these requirements.
Recommendations and then, right.
Good morning, everyone. Agenda item C.2.3 concerns. These amendments were recommended by the Sterile Subcommittee of the Compounding Rules Advisory Group. Of time, I will not be summarizing grammatical or stylistic corrections, only substantive changes recommended by items for which the subcommittee cannot come to a consensus. We are starting off in subsection B, definitions, on lines 38 through 220. Definitions for ET room, buffer room, clean room, designated person, master formulation record, restricted access barrier system, and segregated compounding area. Moving into subsection C, personnel, lines 3 through replace risk of language with category language for pharmacists continuing education requirements. 6 and 370, we made the same change for pharmacy technician continuing education requirements. Advise all persons who perform or oversee compound activities shall be trained in the pharmacy's SOPs. The applicability and frequency of the aseptic technique evaluation. Line 434 to 449 amend the media fill testing requirements. Line 470 provides personnel competency shall be reevaluated at least every 12 months. 72 to 496 apply the evaluation of hand hygiene, garbing, and gloved fingertip and thumb sampling to all personnel who perform compounding or who have direct oversight of compounding personnel but do not perform compounding. Lines 502 to 522 specify the incubation requirements for gloved fingertip and thumb samples and the required results for passing the evaluation. Line 528 provides that reevaluation of personnel shall occur at least every 6 months for personnel to perform compounding and at least every 12 months for personnel who have direct oversight of compounding personnel but do not compound. Line 534 specifies that personnel who have direct oversight of compounding personnel but do not compound shall complete a garbing competency evaluation every 12 months, and the evaluation shall be specified in the pharmacy's SOPs. Line 545 provides that each classified area shall be sampled for microbial contamination. Approach. Line 550 requires surface sampling of all classified areas and pass-through chambers to be conducted at least monthly. Line 559 specifies the ISO class 5, 7, and 8. Line 563 requires an investigation and corrective action to be performed if surface sampling exceeds the specified action levels. Line 571 provides that personnel who only perform restocking or cleaning outside of the primary engineering control shall complete ongoing training as required by the pharmacy's SOPs. Line 601 provides the maximum batch size for all preparations requiring sterility testing shall be limited to 500 final sealed units. Lines 651 to 666 define the three categories of compounded sterile preparations. Line 777 to 787 provide that dry heat depyrogenation shall be used to render thermostable containers and components pyrogen-free. Line 808 provides when specified conditions are met, compounded sterile preparations for direct and immediate administration are not subject to the requirement. Line 819 specifies that the immediate use exemption is limited to simple aseptic measuring and transfer manipulations for different sterile products. Line 830 replaces the requirement that administration must begin within of the preparation with the requirement that administration begin no later than 4 hours from following the start of preparation. Line 844 requires personnel to be trained and demonstrate competence in aseptic processes. Line 850 provides that if a single dose vial is empty or cleaner air, it may be 12 hours as long as the labeled storage requirements are maintained. Line 855 provides that open single-dose ampules shall not be stored for any time period. Line 857 provides that a multiple-dose container, once initially entered, shall not be used for more than 28 days unless otherwise specified by the manufacturer. Line 861 provides that conventionally manufactured pharmaceutical packages shall be restricted to the sterile preparation of admixtures for infusion or through a sterile transfer device for the filling of empty sterile containers. Line 866 provides that multiple dose compounded sterile preparation shall meet the criteria for antimicrobial effectiveness testing and shall not be used for longer than the assigned beyond use date for 28 days, whichever shall be prepared as a category 2 or category 3 preparation. Line 884 provides specific requirements for multiple dose non-preserved aqueous topical and topical ophthalmic compounded sterile preparations. Line 891 provides requirements when a single dose compounded sterile preparation or stock solution is used as a compound to compound additional preparations. Line 899 provides that docking and activation of proprietary vacuum vial systems for immediate administration, docking the system for future activation and administration is considered compounding. Lines 923 to 933 specify the air exchange requirements for unclassified sterile compounding areas, ISO Class 7 rooms, and ISO Class 8 rooms. Clean room suite. Line 934 provides that seals and sweeps shall not be installed at doors between buffer rooms and anterooms. Access doors should be hands-free, and tacky mats shall not be placed within ISO classified areas. Line 944 amends the humidity requirement from below 60% to 60% or below. Line 1046 provides that in a primary engineering control, sterile 70% isopropyl alcohol shall be applied after cleaning and disinfecting and immediately before initiating compounding and applied to the horizontal work surface of the PEC if the compounding process takes 30 minutes or less, or immediately after compounding if the process takes more than 30 minutes. Line 1060 provides that surfaces shall be cleaned prior to being disinfected. The manufacturer shall be followed for cleaning, disinfecting, and sporcidal disinfectants used. And when 70% isopropyl alcohol is used, it shall be allowed to dry. Lines 1071 to 1114 provide the cleaning and disinfection requirements for the primary engineering control, equipment inside the primary engineering control, work surfaces outside of the primary engineering control, as well as floors, walls, doors, shelving, equipment outside of the primary engineering control, and ceilings. Line 1142 provides that an item shall be wiped with disinfectant before being introduced into the clean side of the tankers or brought into the segregated compounding area, provided that doing so will not compromise the item's packaging integrity. Line 1151 provides that an item shall be wiped with sterile 70% isopropyl alcohol before being introduced into the primary engineering control. Line 1157 provides that critical sites, such as vial stoppers, shall be wiped with sterile 70% isopropyl alcohol in the primary engineering control to provide remove contaminants. On-use stating. Line 1179 provides that when assigning a beyond use date, shall apply drug-specific and general stability documentation and shall assign a shorter beyond use date when the stability of the following beyond use date limits. First, line 1186 provides category 1 compounded sterile preparations shall be prepared in a segregated compounding area or and have a beyond use date of not more than 12 hours when stored at controlled room temperature, 4 hours when stored in a refrigerator. Lines 1191 to 1213 provide category 2 compounded sterile preparations shall be prepared in a clean room suite. The beyond use dates for category 2 preparations sterilized, whether it uses sterile or non-sterile starting components, and whether sterility testing is performed and passed. To 1228 provide category 3 compounded non-use date for category 3 preparations is based on whether the preparation is aseptically processed or terminally sterilized and whether it's in a non-aqueous dosage form. Lines 1229 to 1248 provide that assigning category 3 beyond use dates also requires complying with category 3 specific requirements for personnel competency, garbing, environmental monitoring, and frequency of application of sporicidal disinfectants. Lines 1279 to 1359 provide that if the pharmacy uses a laminar airflow hood, biological safety cabinet, compounding aseptic containment isolator as its primary engineer, it shall be initially certified by a qualified independent individual. Lines 1342 and 1381 change the required air quality for the room containing a CAI or CA compounding category 3 preparations from isoclass 8 to isoclass 7. Line 1372 amends the humidity requirement for the room containing a CACI from below 60% to 60% or below. Line 1550 provides that before entering the buffer room, compounding personnel shall wipe eyeglasses if worn. Hygiene and garbing in an order determined by the pharmacy depending on placement of the sink. The order of garbing shall be documented in the pharmacy's SOPs, and garb shall be donned and dealt in an order that reduces risk of contamination. Line 1560 to 1572 provide the minimum garbing requirements for category 1 or category 2 compounding. Lines 1573 to 1585 provide additional garbing requirements for the buffer room where category 3 compounded sterile preparations are prepared. Line 1595 provides that disposable soap containers shall not be filled or topped off, and brushes shall not be used for hand hygiene. Line 1602 provides aseptic hand cleansing shall be performed using an alcohol-based hand rub. Line 1607 provides that sterile gloves shall be donned in a classified area or segregated compounding area. Lines 1614 to 1623 provide additional garbing requirements and requirements for disinfecting reusable equipment. Line 1653 provides that quality assurance practices include tests indicate that compounding personnel and personnel who have direct oversight of compounding personnel but do not compound can competently perform aseptic procedures. Line 1728 provides sterility and bacterial endotoxin testing requirements for finished preparation release checks. Line 1801 updates the viable air sampling requirements. Line 1822 provides that the manufacturer's instructions shall be followed for operation of the impaction air sampler. At least 1 cubic meter or 1,000 liters of air from each location shall be sampled, and media devices shall be handled in a manner that avoids contamination. Lines 1834 to 1856 provide incubation procedures and also provide alternative incubation procedures to shorten the overall incubation period. Line 1910 provides sterility testing requirements. If 1 to 39 preparations are compounded in a single batch, the sterility testing shall be performed on 10% of the number of preparations prepared, rounded up to the next whole number. If more than 40 preparations are prepared in a single batch, the sample sizes specified as follows shall be used. Lines 1921 to 1964 specify the sterility testing requirements based on whether the preparation is a parenteral preparation, antibiotic solid, ophthalmic or other non-injectable preparation, or bulk solid product. Line 1965 provides that sterility testing resulting in failure shall result in an investigation and corrective action, both of which shall be documented. We are now moving into subsection E, records. Line 1985 provides that compounding records for compounding pursuant to patient-specific prescription drug orders or medication orders not prepared from non-sterile ingredients shall be maintained by the pharmacy and shall include a complete formula unless the preparation is compounded according to the manufacturer's labeling instructions. Lines 2009 to 2081 provide the record-keeping requirements for compounded sterile preparations prepared from non-sterile ingredients or prepared for more than one patient. Specifically, line 2012 requires a master formulation record and specifies the information included in that record. Second, line 2054 provides a compounding record that documents the compounding process shall be created for all preparations and specifies the information included in that record. No substantive changes were made to subsection F, so we are moving into the final subsection G, recall procedures. Line 2199 provides, in the event of a recall, the pharmacist in charge shall ensure that the distribution of any affected compounded sterile preparations is determined, including the date and quantity of distribution. Line 2209 provides the pharmacist in charge shall ensure that any unused dispensed compounded sterile preparations are recalled and any stock remaining in the pharmacy is quarantined. Line 2213 provides procedures for the recall of out of specification dispensed compounded sterile preparations. And line 2220 provides that SOPs for the recall of out of specification dispensed compounded sterile preparations shall contain procedures to determine the severity and urgency of the problem, determine the disposal and documentation of the recalled preparation, and investigate and document the reason for failure. I'm now open to taking questions.
Thank you, Iman, for going through that. Alright, board, so Iman is here for questions. The task force is here as well. I need to see where we go. What your thoughts are.
How many folks were on the task force?
On the sterile subcommittee, I believe it was 5, 6. I'm gonna be turning to Megan a lot.
And how long did it take to go through all this?
How many meetings did we have, or just now?
How many meetings?
I
just wanna know.
We had quite a few. There were a lot of meetings with the sterile subcommittee and then a lot of meetings with Iman, Cindy, and myself to draft the recommendations into rule format. So I think we're looking at probably a 6-month process to get to where
So
we
a
are
lot
now.
of work was put into this.
Yes.
So basically, remember the chart
Yes.
so everything that was in that chart was then placed into the rules. Or edited the rules.
And so there's no comments so far.
We're not at the comment period yet, so after you propose the rule is when it would be published in the register and we would start receiving comments. We're not at that.
So this was available for the public to read yesterday. Does that include the task force? Did the task force have this?
No, it was available.
So they are reading it for the first time. So can we hear from them and hear what they think on these rules thus far?
Pleasure of the board.
If that's what,
Yes, I'd like to hear from the task force.
before I'm on. The members of the task force can come forward. Gentlemen, if you would introduce yourselves. And I've seen a little bit of this, so I will say everybody probably needs to speak up a little bit.
So my name's Cole Knudsen.
I'm Jim Herzer, Las Colinas Pharmacy in Irving, Texas.
Jasper LaVoy, the Woodlands Compounding Pharmacy. Shenandoah.
Thank you, gentlemen. So Jenny has asked to hear your comments. I'll let y'all decide between the three of you. Who wants to speak first, or do you have a spokesperson among you? But
Well, we come from different areas of practice. Cole comes from one area of practice, we come from independent pharmacy 503A type of practice, so a little different models. But if I'm going to start, I said it last time and I'll say it again, that the greatest threat to patient health is the lack of affordable access to healthcare. And the more we regulate ourselves, beyond what is reasonable, the greater the cost to us, which has to be passed on to patients. And that's a threat. And you think about how many bad actors there are versus how many patients there are, and bad actors can be reined in, I think, very well by nice, solid legislation, or regulations, but not going crazy. So for me, having some common sense is important, because the state boards across the United States right now are looking at Texas. And they're trying to decide, there's a few that have already passed USP carte and their patients are suffering. And so the question is all these other boards are looking at Texas as the voice of reason. And they're saying, those guys usually have some common sense down there in Texas. And, kudos to you guys. So we have an opportunity, I think, to have something meaningful, protective, but also that doesn't raise crazy costs. One of the things that was brought up last time that I did a lot of research on, and I'm sorry, what's your name, sir? Right next to Jenny?
Rick.
Rick, thank you. Rick, you brought up some great points and gave me cause to go do research, and it was on sterility assurance levels, because in sterile compounding, that's it. That's the gold standard, right? We're trying to achieve sterile levels and sterile assurance levels. Well, the manufacturers strive for a goal of 1 in 1 million failures. That's what they strive for. And matter of fact, there's a textbook they use, it's called for pharmaceutical manufacturing. And in that textbook, it talks about filtration failures versus autoclave failures. And believe it or not, they're equal. Everybody thinks that filters fail way more than autoclaves. When properly used, filtration, which is what we primarily use, is amazing. It's amazingly effective. That's why the manufacturers use it. And when combined with sterility testing afterwards to prove and validate that you did a good job, bubble testing of the filters, we get amazing results. I've been making intrathecals, which is the highest risk thing since the 90s. Never had a problem. I've used filters the whole time, okay? And that's the number one issue. You can make one mistake on intrathecals and the patient's dead. So I do think that upon looking at the research more closely, used properly, filters, autoclave, same thing. Matter of fact, NECC, which we all are worried about, was using autoclave when they had their failures and killed, a bunch of patients and injured hundreds more. So let's keep that in the back of our mind, that it's about how you use it properly, and it's not about autoclave is superior. filtration. The other thing that came up.
Can I interrupt you? In all three of you, in reading through the rules, was there anything that maybe y'all discussed in your meetings that wasn't on here, or are there things
Yes.
on here that maybe wasn't what y'all had agreed on?
We had felt, the majority of us, not all of us, felt that on category 3, when you satisfy all the requirements, it's not just filtration or sterilization, but data collection, facility parameters. When you put all that together, you can achieve longer expiration dates. And so we were looking for 90, 120, and 180, but I think what got imposed is 60 at refrigeration, 60 at room temperature, 90 at refrigeration, 120 in the freezer. And we feel like that 90, 120, and 180 is more appropriate if we have the data, if we have the testing to prove it. If we don't, we can't give that. And so it's pretty easy, to say, do you have it or do you not? And I think the inspectors are gonna kick our bottoms if we don't have it and say, you know what, you can't give that. And so the other thing that was brought up.
If you'll allow me,
Well, is it my turn or your turn?
oh, go ahead, I was
Okay.
just waiting for you to
Thank
finish.
you.
All right, gentlemen.
Well, I believe Ms. Yocum asked a question to the entire panel.
Yeah, so I was
Yeah.
curious.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Before you go on to that,
I
if you
apologize.
did the,
Yeah, so I just was gonna comment on your question, is we really hadn't got a chance to go through it and look at it. There were some things that were, some changes that we were requested that, I just hadn't got a chance to go in and look at actually to see if everything is in there. So it's a little premature, obviously once this gets out and we can go through it thoroughly, but there were some things that we needed to update, in addition to the 797 updates. So it's really hard to say, but I feel like you guys probably did a great job capturing all the information that we discussed, but until, I can really go through it, it's hard to say. There could be some things, because there was so much material, there could be some things that, hey, we discussed it, we agreed on it, but maybe it didn't actually make it.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking is.
Yeah, so it's hard to say at this point.
Yeah, I think on the briefness that we heard right now from Imam, like I was following along and the first thing I saw was like line 404 about designated persons. It's a little confusing to me the way it's written, but it's one of those things lawyers can read it a lot better than I can, so I got to read it a few times to completely understand it. But it seems right now it's a little different than what we may have mentioned, but I'm not sure on the verbiage. So I just
Okay.
need a little bit more time.
Well, I do have one question, and that was on the definition of beyond use state. I kind of expected that to change, and it didn't.
I did propose that at one point, if we're gonna adopt the USP language of category 1, 2, 3, and they're beyond use states, shouldn't we have the same definition as USP? Right now, it's a different definition. And I think if we're gonna talk, it needs to be apples to apples on that.
Yeah, I wouldn't highlight it.
And I would like to thank
I would
Imam and
agree, I thought
Megan.
we agreed that we would update the
Yeah.
definition.
We did. Matter of fact, all parties of the 6 of us agreed that the Texas definition was not quite as good as the USP definition. USP did some good things in that. There were some good things I didn't agree with at all, but they did some good things, and so we tried to take all that into account, which is what y'all tasked us to do.
But your overall consensus is that you like what is, your overall consensus, you like what has been.
So I would like to comment on that,
I
since
mean,
you got a chance to.
of what has been
Excuse me.
within the.
Go ahead.
I'm just asking your question. No, I'm trying to make.
No, I said your overall consensus is that you are fine with what was proposed.
Yes, I wanted to comment
Okay.
on that. No, right. So, not exactly, right? So I didn't make the last meeting. I did send a video, kind of went through it. I watched the board meeting and saw that there was some sound problems, et cetera. But since then, I've had a little bit of a chance to kind of step back, kind of while we were all involved in this, you can't see the trees because of the forest, but, I had some time to step back and kind of really see the bigger picture, right? And so what I found, and this is, kind kind of a concerning issue, I believe, is that, you know, previously when we took the rules from the previous 797 brought in the board rules, it was to give the inspectors some teeth to go out and you know, look at these sterile pharmacies, because the rules changed. At that time, people didn't like it. They're like, what, we gotta make a clean room, that's a lot of money, et cetera. So we got, you know, those rules put into our board rules. And when we did that, we brought them in pretty much verbatim. I mean, we didn't wholesale take the whole thing. We were very thoughtful about what we put in, which I think the majority of everybody agrees with, I agree with, so we didn't take it wholesale, but what we took pretty much verbatim and brought it in. And now what we're doing is with these updates, so they raised the bar on that, what we're doing now is on a few things, we changed those rules, you know, and so that definitely got concerned with that, we've lessened those rules, so one of them was BUD. And I think that's an important fact. I mean, that's the overarching thing. And what I found was fundamentally it was because of the difference between our opinion and their opinion on excuse me, 797, not 79, yeah, 797, and its validity, right? And so, you know, there's a group of folks that feel like 797 is, you know, federal guidance. It's the minimum standard federally. Chapters under 1,000 are enforceable from the FDA. That's been my experience. And there's other folks that feel like it's just guidance only. I think that's a really important question, and I don't necessarily think the board should take my word for it or your word for it or anybody's. I feel at this point, because that's such a critical item, that you might seek third-party legal counsel and get an opinion on that. Because, you know, God forbid if we do lesser rules and there's an NECC situation, you know, they're gonna be looking around, excuse me, and they're gonna be saying, you know, there'll be a lot of fingers getting pointed, and they'll say, well, why did y'all adopt lesser rules than the federal standard? And if your third party comes back and says, hey, do what you want, then fine. But if your third party comes back and says, hey, look, you know, you really probably need to take this seriously before you create lesser rules. So, you know, that's my opinion on it. I believe there's some things that we should really look at before we adopt lesser rules. I know that's what's in here. There's only a few areas where we decided to do that, but they're very important areas. The BUD, we pretty much, you know, decided to extend the dating. Really, and again, it's on opinions. I'm not saying I'm right or you're right, but I feel like at this point, because it's so important, that you should really get a third party, because if anything, it's a CYA for the board, you know, down the road, because if there's issues, if there's litigation, you can say, well, we got a third party opinion, because our opinions are split. So I'll leave it at that.
So some people say there are lesser rules, that we're adopting lesser rules, but it's actually more rules than what we currently have on the Texas State Board. Do we go full USP on everything? No, because a lot of it just cost-wise, patient access-wise, just didn't make sense to us. We're in kind of the community pharmacy area, and you will limit access if you adopt everything fully. Just a lot of pharmacies just can't handle it. There's some, you know, we put some costs together on what it would cost me just to become full USP, Category 3, everything, and it's about $2 million over just to do it, and then you have costs they're incurring all the time. So there's a, you know, that's why you had to take all that into account. You couldn't just go full USP. It's kind of impractical in a lot of areas.
Yeah, and I'll comment on that. We didn't really, and one of the allowances that we agreed upon was to allow them to use their current literature. So the $2 million would not be incurred, because in that section we allowed that you could use your existing literature and wouldn't have to do new stability studies. And that's where the bulk of those costs were that you guys came up with. And I'm not saying there's not additional costs, but we didn't also wholesale take this over. Our mission was to really update the rules to the new bar. You know, USP came out with updated rules. You know, our job was to look at what's currently in there that doesn't match anymore and to bring it up to that standard. So we weren't really looking at adding anything new, necessarily just updating to what the current standard is. And I think we did a great job of it, honestly. There was a lot of information in there. We did a really good job of pulling that in, but, you know, again, you know, the part where we're deciding to go lesser than that, you know, federal standard, it's questionable.
I mean, it's definitely, you guys did the yeoman's work. I mean, you did a lot of hard work. I do think that, you know, it's worth stating, just for us as a board to remember, is that, you know, we do look at USPS guidance. It's not mandated to us. And it's really, we're not coming up with what best practices are. What we're coming up with is the least restrictive way for us to protect the public and to make sure that we have good practices in place. So I think that that's something we kind of want to keep in mind as we move forward and go through it. And I think, Jim, you had something else you wanted to say?
I do have two papers I prepared for you. One was from my lawyer, who is a nationally recognized expert in FDA inspections. And anyway, I wanted to find out, you know, are you finding that FDA is using USP as a basis for investigating pharmacies? They don't call it an inspection, they call it an investigation, you know? And he says, you know, I do 503A and 503B pharmacies, Jim, and been doing them for years and years, represented hundreds of clients. And he said in 483s, which are what they give you when you exit and they tell you what all you did wrong. That's your criticism paper that you've got to deal with. And also, when he's dealing with the inspectors, investigators, he said USP is not brought up. And so I have a paper that I've prepared for you that you can read his words, not my words. And the other thing I did, I prepared a paper based on can we achieve sterility in a little podunk, you know, compounding our bathtub pharmacy, you know, which is a lot of what people say, oh, they're compounding their bathtub in the back of that pharmacy. Well, proper use, when we do techniques that are proper, which is what Jasper and I are wanting to have happen, then we're achieving the same levels of sterility that manufacturers are. So I wrote a little paper for you, you know, that you can quickly look through just to say that, okay, this isn't just Jim's opinion, this is actually what good manufacturing practices are, and we can achieve those same things. So just want to let you know that I did a little work because you guys made me think, and thank you.
Have any of y'all been inspected by the FDA?
So I'll comment on that. Yeah, I've been involved in a few of those with the 503A sterile compounding pharmacy. So I didn't mention earlier, I work with Central Admixture Pharmacy Services. We do primarily the TPN therapy. Our customers are hospital systems. So it's pretty much just a clean room setup, and we're a very niche pharmacy doing that type of compounding. And when they came in, they absolutely do use 797. And for example, when they're looking at, say, your environmental testing, and they're looking at the alert limits, that's the reference they're using. They're not just coming up with new alert limits out of the air, they're looking at 797. So in a lot of different areas like that example, that's kind of how they're using it. I mean, they're not like beating you over the head with it, but they've got to reference certain things, and that's where they reference them. They don't have another document that they hand you that they reference those type of items. So when they're looking at temperature, when they're looking at your quality control program, when they're looking at, you know, the litany of things that you're responsible for, that's the document that they use.
So you don't compound from bulk raw chemical, or TPN?
Yeah, we're all finished pharmaceuticals, all sterile, starting with sterile pharmaceutical
Okay,
products.
so us adopting category 3 wouldn't affect your facility?
No, not really, not what we're doing. But, you know, I don't know if they come into y'all's type of pharmacy and hold you to a different standard. I'm just telling you what my experience has been, and that's what they hold you to. I mean, they definitely brought it out, we looked at it, we had some talks about certain things. One of the issues they had, you know, was looking at some environmental monitoring, alert limits and stuff. And they also brought in other literature as well, you know, on those discussions, but they definitely had that as a reference, and they were holding us to it.
That was not my experience with the FDA. They did not follow USP.
So I guess, Jim, you said you had FDA to finish the question.
And really what they're looking for in the non-sterile to sterile compounding pharmacy like ours is they're looking for sanitary conditions. And if they can prove in sanitary conditions, then what they do is they say, okay, you're no longer an exempt 503A compounding pharmacy. Now we're going to hold you to good manufacturing practices, CGMP. And that's what they want to do. Because what are they trained in? They're not trained in USP. Most of them don't even know what USP is. What they're trained in is good manufacturing practices because they were created to regulate and to inspect manufacturers. We are kind of a sideline for them. And so when they come into our place, they're looking at what are unsanitary conditions that can have a risk for patients. We know CGMP, therefore, if we can prove that you don't satisfy sanitary conditions, you have insanitary conditions, we can now inspect you based on a more stringent standard, and that's rough. So just FYI, in our way, and Jenny, I don't know about you, had the same experience.
Yeah, it was, USP did not come up.
Yeah, and that's interesting, I find that very interesting, that's why I thought, getting a second opinion, a third party, because that was not my experience, and I believe both of our experiences are truthful, So, I've always heard that every chapter below 1,000 is federally enforceable, since the beginning of my career, and so to hear that it's not now is I don't really believe that, I believe it is, and that's been my experience.
So of all the panel members, of the 6, how many of you would fall into the category 3?
Three.
There's a third one. So it was half of you would be affected by category 3 and half of you would not. Okay.
Kind of depends, it depends on what you're doing, it just so happens we're very niche, so there's other hospital systems that definitely would fall into that area,
So what category do you fall into?
too.
Can you all remind us what the, or Megan or Eamon, can you all remind us what the differences were on the BUD? Like what the variance was, and then I remember we compromised just to get the rules out last time. I don't think we necessarily had consensus, but it was consensus to go. Just so we know exactly, because it seems like that's what we're primarily talking about, so I figured it might be helpful to.
Yeah, we basically went to the, jump straight to the, terminal sterilization numbers, so.
Yeah, let's let Megan pull on exactly what was.
Yeah, so I don't know if you still have that table handy to you, Randy, but if you do, it's under 14, establishing the state, there's a recommendation on the far right. So this is where the group broke out, there were 6 of them, and they broke out 3 and 3. And so I think there was part of it where they could not come to a consensus on table 13.3. They voted to adopt table 13 as it was, but 3 members voted for aseptically processed CSPs or terminally sterilized with sterility testing performed as passed to get 45 days of controlled room temperature, 60 days of refrigerator, and 90 days of freezer. And you all said to go with the longer the BUT days for those. And then they also could not reach a consensus on table 14. So 3 members were for adopting 14 with a carve out for anhydrous based on current literature up to 180 days. And for this one, you told us to go with the table. And then we had, 3 members for aseptically processed, sterility tested, and passing all clinical tests for category 3 CSPs, getting 90 days at controlled room temperature, 120 days at refrigerator, and 180 days at freezer, and if anhydrous, 180 days if supporting evidence at room temperature. And so I think that may have been what Jasper was talking about earlier.
So to simplify that just a little bit on where the variance is, so there's, and I'm asking y'all because y'all have gone through this several times. So there's basically 3 layers of safety on the category 3, right, that are factored in the BUD, right? So there's that it's aseptically processed, which is everything. There's the terminal sterilization, and then there's the quality assurance microbial testing on the back. Did I get that right?
Sterility testing, so then the sterility testing.
And the sterility
and the
testing.
terminal sterilization, so it's stepwise on the day.
And the more cleaning, the more monitoring of the rooms, more environmental.
Sure. I'm talking about the actual, like, not the process of doing it, but like the things that factor into the BUD, right? So the things that actually.
No, that does, you have to do those monitoring and cleaning to get to category 3. You have to clean more often.
Sure. Okay.
More figurative testing, every single little
I'm
process.
talking just about the table, I'm sorry guys, but I'm trying to simplify something complex.
Is all of those things they're talking about is how you decide which table you're in, right?
Right.
So they do all of those things to find the correct table, and then to your point,
Right.
yes. Yeah, so the first thing you're looking at is, if you're looking at the table for category 2s, you're looking at the characteristics, which first would be the compounding method, so you're looking at aseptically processed or terminally sterilized.
Yeah.
And then your next question is sterility testing performed and passed, yes or no?
Yeah.
And then you're looking at the storage conditions, so controlled room temperature, refrigerator, or freezer, and that's within the table how you find where you fall. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
It does, thank you.
And this is the one on table 13, where you all actually said to go with the longer. So this is one that was changed to where they could get the 45, 60, 90. And then table 14 for the category 3 is the one where you all said to go with the table instead of going for the longer PUD dating.
I guess the part of this that kind of just, I guess it makes my head hurt a little, a lot of it makes my head hurt, just to be honest, but the part that, you know, about the decision making on this that kind of just strikes me is that that's on the BUDs, that's the one place we're changing, you know, it's perhaps one of the most high-risk things we do in pharmacy. So whenever we're talking about safety, it just strikes me that we're looking at a guideline for sterile compounding, and the one that we're adjusting is the one with the highest risk to the patient. That's the part that kind of makes me cringe a little bit, whereas we're going verbatim in other categories where we're dealing just with sterile products. But that's the one we're compromising on. That bugs me. I don't know. That just kind of plants a little something in the back of my head. The other part of it that's kind of striking to me, so is that we're picking dates. We're picking dates. There's not another guidance out there that's a competitive guidance. We're picking a date.
But that's what USP did. They don't have any data to support the dates that they chose either.
Have we clarified that directly with them, or are we relying on secondary hearsay? Because I've only heard hearsay. If there's something we have written from them, that's great. But I have not seen anything or heard anything directly from a USP task force member telling me that. And if that's out there, that's helpful. That's helpful to know what goes into the decision-making process, but we're kind of making that assumption. That's a pretty big assumption when we consider the lower risk. Because I mean, we're talking about taking something that has potentially microbial contamination on it, most likely has microbial contamination on it in some way, shape, or form. And taking that and turning something that has no kind of microbial contamination at all. And yeah, the processes are great. We utilize filtration, autoclaving, all these things to do it, but they're a process. And you know, if you're not also validating the sterility testing of that, if you're not also doing those things, you don't know for sure that thing is sterile going to that patient, then I struggle with extending the beyond use date even further. And the literature is great, but the literature that's out there about sterilization is about controlled laboratory activities that are being monitored, you have protocols, those types of things. Whereas in the real world, people have varying levels, and we measure their competency after the fact, but we don't, you know, even the most competent and impressive person makes mistakes. That's the reason we do so much quality assurance testing in all aspects of pharmacy. So I just struggle with the fact that that's the one section of the BUDs that we want to go with. The last comment I'll make, and then I'll shut up unless somebody asks me something directly, but because I know I'm kind of going on a monologue. But the one thing I would say is I remember when we went through this previously, when USP came out in 2007, and all of a sudden we were having to use gowns, and we had to do clean rooms, and you know, we had to use sterile gloves, and now we had to use sterile isopropyl alcohol. I heard the same things then too. I heard that it's going to drive up cost and we're not going to be able to provide care for our patients. Interestingly, on the hospital side, we didn't really have a choice on this. Hospitals that were out there, they couldn't wait for state board rules. They were getting actively inspected by Joint Commission, so they just did the thing. And yeah, it cost more. It cost a lot more, but we made it work for patients. So I struggle a little bit with the argument because it's a common argument in sterile compounding. It's a fair argument because as we increase regulation, yeah, we increase cost. So, but it's interesting to me, that's the one thing that we're compromising, or one of the main things we're compromising on. And not going with the standard, going with the standard on everything else, but that's the one we're backing off on.
So I guess going to Jenny's question or into your comment is, do we have any indication in any of the literature that was reviewed or looked at as far as how USB came up with their dates?
I don't know how USD came up with their dates, if you're asking me.
Yeah.
If it makes you feel better, Randy, what's happening here today is not a final decision.
Yeah.
This is just something that could potentially be put out for people to comment and give more information, more literature, whatever they feel like would be helpful support in making a decision. So you're not locked in any way.
So can we make like some tweaks and put that out for public comment, like changing the definition of PUD, or is that too drastic?
No,
of a
so
change?
this hasn't been
Yeah, this
proposed or
hasn't been
anything,
published
this
yet.
is just a draft that we came up with, and actually Iman and I did miss updating the PUD definition, we apologize for that, we looked at our notes and saw it. So that is something that if we did put it out, as their recommendation, we would wanna change the PUD definition, but no, this can be, you can change it
Yeah.
before it goes out, this is just a draft in case you wanted to propose it.
Yeah, and so let's kind of level the playing field so we know where we're at, because as a board, we wanna get this right. And we know that we wanna get this right. So this has not been proposed yet. So we can make those changes and propose it. Next time we'll come for public opinion and public comment. The reality then is we still have the ability to make changes and propose it again or take it forward. So we're not locked in to propose, adopt. So we wanna get this right. And so we can make those changes today. Starting with the BUD definition. And then from there, we can actually do one of two things. We can pull it back and say we want more work on it, or we can propose it so that we get public opinion and public comment.
Megan, what do you suggest on this, since you've been part of this?
What I'm hearing from everybody, it seems, is that you want more information, more to work off of. And I think one of the best ways to do that would be to put it out and let everybody, have time to really dive into it, submit all of the things that they feel like you need to review, and let y'all have time to really read through all of it and then come back together. So again, it's always up to
I
you
think
all,
that's a
but
great
that's my,
Y'all,
Well, I
y'all
think
say.
So when would it be out there for, I think people really need plenty of time to go through it?
yeah, so after you propose a rule, we send it to the governor's office, and the governor's office has to review it before we can put it into the register. So a little bit of it depends on the governor's office, but that usually only takes a couple of weeks. And then we submit it to the register. When you submit it to the register, it usually takes a week to
About a
2 weeks. Yeah, 2 weeks at the maximum, probably about a week for it to be published in the next issue of the register. And then there is, the 30-day comment period at a minimum. So it could be longer than that, but there's a minimum of 30 days where it's out there for everybody to read, digest, and submit comments.
So is it on our website or is it in the register?
It's in the register, but we link to it on our website. So there's a page on our website with laws and rules, there's a drop down, and it'll say rule changes. And you can click on that and it'll take you to all of the rules that have been submitted to the register for adoption or all of the rules that have been submitted to the register for proposal. And it'll give you, a little thing down there that, when it's effective or when the public comment period is going to end, depending on adopted or proposed.
But I think before we go for a motion, which I think that's what you're going on, I think that we need to look to see what we wanna tweak and what changes, so that all of those are in there so we can get comment.
Just from my quick review, the BUD definition was one. And then I was very confused with the line 404. The aseptic technique of all compounding personnel and personnel who have direct oversight of compounding personnel but do not compound. So, and that shows up in several places, on, lines 472 through 495 and then, throughout. That verbiage, I think I know what the intent was, but that's not how I read it. So, for example, you have a pharmacist who is checking the final check of a sterile product and they're going through the log formula worksheet, double checking the math, holding the vial or syringe up, looking for particulates, making sure the label's correct. That person never goes into the lab to make anything. Why would they need to go in once a year or every 6 months to do fingertip testing and garb qualification and media field testing since they never go in there? And I think this was meant, the verbiage was meant to provide that person the ability not to have to do those things, but I read it a different way. So maybe Iman might be able to. Does that make sense?
Sure, so I can tell you where the verbiage came from.
Okay.
It comes from USP. So I think for what you're referring to, it's coming out of 2.1 in USP, where it says before beginning to compound CSPs independently or have direct oversight of compounding personnel must complete training, blah, 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 blah. So that's where it's coming from. And then they can correct me, but what I have in my notes is that the group, I don't know if it was unanimous, but that the group, majority of them said to adopt persons compounding media use or performing restocking, cleaning, disinfecting, that, and then to adopt the categories and the training that came out of there. So that's where it came from. I don't know about the meaning behind it because we didn't come up with the wording. We just mimicked it.
Yeah, I think the intent was if you're supervising somebody compounding, that you need to have the skill set to actually do it. And so if you're in there compounding, so if you're a pharmacist and your hands go in the hood, you have to do it every 6 months. If you're just kicked back checking and you never got your hands in the hood, they want you to do it at least once a year. I mean, that's the intent.
So USP, so for example, the designated person is someone different than, say, if I'm a designated person, I go on vacation, I need a pharmacist to come in and just check logs while I'm gone. USP has a carve out for that type of scenario in the chart, table 2. And right now it's a person who perform in-process checks or final verifications. Their rule is defined by the SOPs. They are not required to go in the cleaner. Whereas the way it's written here, it seems like they are now, even though they never make anything. It's kind of a temporary situation where why would that person who has never been in a cleaner have to go make something? Even though they are pre-trained, they're trained by the SOPs to understand everything going on and have written tests every year to do it. Because when you bring someone else into a clean room, you're increasing the bacteria in there that's never in there. They don't know how to move, what to touch, how to clean properly, because they only have to do it once a year. That actually is very unsafe. So let's keep that person outside doing their job and allow the SOPs to define them as what the intention was.
So if I'm hearing this correctly, the direct oversight personnel, y'all are saying should go through the training but not necessarily have to go through the testing.
If it's the person who does go back occasionally, yes, they need to go through the testing and the media fills. If it's just a pharmacist outside the clean room system checking the final product and checking the log formula worksheet, making sure the math is correct and everything's correct on it, they should not have to do that.
They should not have to be trained.
No, not trained in the lab with media fills and fingertip testing.
Jimmy, can I ask, just to make sure I'm understanding, if you look at lines 410 through 415, does that not carve out the people that you're wanting to carve out? Is it not?
It does there. It does there.
Yeah, so I think those lines 410 through 415 are meant to indicate who don't, the types of personnel that don't have direct oversight. So that's what, such as these people. So if they're just doing these things, then they're not direct oversight.
Okay, so from an inspection perspective, our inspectors that walk in and see, a pharmacist checking, a sterile product, and they don't have those every 6 months media fill fingertip testing, is that, I guess we train our inspectors what to look for, but that's kind of my concern, is how will that be from an inspection purpose?
Yeah, and I think if new rules do come out, we would have to train all of our inspectors in what they mean and how they're applied, and where to look. It will have to be a learning process for everyone, about what these mean.
I think the important differentiation between the paragraph you just called out and that 404 to 406 is whenever we're talking about the direct oversight of compounding personnel. So if the pharmacist is responsible for, if the way because everybody's setup's different, right?
Yeah.
So if your setup is designed such, I would interpret this, this is how Joint Commission interpreted it as well, that if your pharmacist is in the clean room suite and they're responsible for checking the products, but they're also supposed to be supervising the technicians they sent to technique, because pharmacists are supposed to be competent in whatever they're supervising, right? So if they're there supervising, if they're physically present supervising, and they're doing that, but if there's a different process for that, and they're checking outside, literally they're just doing video in-process checks or that kind of thing, that's the differentiator between those.
So Jenny, are you looking for additional language, or do you
I
feel
just
like?
want clarification, that's how I read it, and that concerned me, so I was, let me see how others took it and interpreted it.
I will say, having implemented these rules and talking with other people that have already implemented these rules, or not these rules, but the ESP guidance, that if we have a pharmacist that's checking stuff, we actually do that every 12 months.
Randy, I'm sorry, are there people showing me that they can't hear you in the back? I don't know if you can speak up a tiny bit.
For once, I'm talking softly.
I know.
Wow, that's new. Okay, is that better? Okay, sorry about that. No, what I was saying though is like what we're seeing in application for organizations that have already implemented these rules or not these rules, but the USP guidance for other reasons. They are training if they have a pharmacist that's just checking but they don't compound or they're unlikely to compound, they are doing 12-month validations just because they're supervising those people, so they need to be competent in whatever they're supervising. And so that's the rationale there. But if they do compound, whether it's pharmacist or tech, they're doing every 6 months. That's the application of that language in 404 to 406 that I've seen so far to date. But you do have scenarios, one addendum on the 410 to 415. You do have scenarios where like people will check remotely. So like if you have like a rural pharmacy and somebody's doing the verification by video or something like that, or they're doing it by, they're doing like pictures or gravimetrics or whatever, they just need to be competent in that, right? They don't need to be, because they're not supervising the technician's compounding technique or any of that kind of stuff.
Any other tweaks?
I have one, and I think it's just a discordance. The definition for immediate use on line 29 just needs to be updated to match the language on line 830.
Line 29?
Page.
Page 29?
Line 29, definition line 29, or is it? Yeah.
Line 29 is about isolate.
I'm just kidding.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's definition number 29.
Okay.
Yeah, definition number 29 just needs to be updated to match the definition or to be in accordance with line 830.
So you're saying line 143?
Correct. 143 to 145. Just needs to, I think it's just an oversight.
Needs to match which line?
830. It's immediate use.
It's an easy fix.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Other considerations, tweaks?
Yes, but I don't think it's, I don't think we can address it today. And it is, just overall, there is no carve out for high risk preparation for 1 or 2. You have to have, according to this, you have to have those tested. And there are many instances where you just need to make 1 10 ml vial or 1 10 ml bottle of something for 1 person. And to have to go through all this, you'd have to make a bigger batch, have it all tested, and then have a short BUD, so they may have like a 2-week time period to be able to use it. It's not cost effective. So there's nothing in here that's a carve out for the onesie twosies. And I don't know how we would address that.
Got a question on that then, Jenny. Couldn't you just give it lower dating? If you're just making 1, you don't need the extended dating, so you don't really need to do the testing, right? Or am I missing something?
I think you're missing something.
What am I missing on that?
So you have someone who's on a lifetime ophthalmic that's for corneal rejection. They can't use the commercially available because they have an allergy to the preservatives in it. And I know that we've got a carve out for ophthalmic, so maybe that's not a great example. Let me use this as an example. A veterinarian who needs apomorphine injection on their shelf as an antidote for a dog that's been poisoned. That's something that they need to have at all times. They don't need to have to order it every 2 weeks or every 28 days. It's something they need to have on hand and use right then. They need something that's gonna have a longer shelf life and a longer date. And it's 1 5 ml vial. It's not 25 ml vials, it's just 1. So there's nothing in here that would allow us to do that. And that eliminates a certain patient population, both human and animal, that would not be able to have those meds if we follow this strictly. So again, patient access.
Do you have a proposal on how?
That's what I'm not today.
All right.
Something to think about, and maybe some public comments would
That would help.
help.
Other thoughts? Questions? You flinched. Yeah.
I was trying to think of the language of how to propose with amendments. So I'd like to move to propose for, or to accept for public comment, propose for public comment?
Yeah, so.
Propose for
yeah.
public comment
And if you
with
are,
with the amendments that we just stated. So the change to immediate use, the change to
BUD.
BUD. All right, so we do have do you have a question?
I just wanna reiterate with Jenny, we also have something like that, like a dexamethasone, 20 milligram per ml solution. We have to keep that on hand, because if a patient gets an ear injury, if they don't get the injection within 72 hours, they go deaf. So kind of same situation we have. We don't make enough of it, but what we have is very good.
All right, so at this point, we have a motion with the proposed changes to the definition as well as others. Do we have a second? Bonnie Lewis has made the second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
All right, you want it?
It's a vote.
It is vote. All right, well, the motion does carry. And so will be proposed then with those changes for public comment. All right, Iman, thank you for going through and taking us through that. With that, we will go back to, gentlemen, thank you so much for your service. And
Thank you,
Backup documentation if you're just reading, okay?
thank you for being here today. All right, with that, we'll go to C.3.
Alright, Madam President, board members, if you look behind C.3, you're gonna see the rule review plan for fiscal year 2022, 2025, review and approval. State law requires you review the rules on a 4-year cycle. And while it requires that you review the rules on a 4-year cycle, what you're looking to see is if you still need these rules. It is not about the content of them. And there are 2 up for adoption today, 2 sections. The first one, C 3.1.1, is chapter 291 concerning pharmacies, institutional pharmacies or class Cs. And the second one up for adoption today is C.3.1.2, chapter 303 concerning destruction of drugs. Those are up for adoption.
All right, do we have a motion to adopt? Donna has made a motion to adopt and Ian has seconded. All those in favor? All right, that carries. It's 10:17 and I've seen some restlessness, so what if we go ahead and take a 13-minute break, give or take, and we'll come back at 10:30. a notation that we are gonna go out of order from the agenda. We're unsure of how long sterile products would take. So we do have some things that are scheduled in. So at this point, we're gonna go to E on your agenda, and I'll invite David Merriman forward to talk about the PMP advisory committee.
Good morning, Madam President, members of the board. Prescription Monitoring Program Advisory Group met on June 27th of 2024. During this meeting, Emily Donahue with Bamboo Health, our PMP vendor, presented to the advisory group. In addition, Bamboo Health's senior data scientist, Joe Carhart, discussed various topics and answered numerous questions pertaining to PMP data and analytics. Both representatives fielded numerous questions from members of the advisory group. I also provided a PMP program update to the group, highlighting PMP feature enhancements that were implemented earlier in the year. Finally, members of the group engaged in discussion of several PMP-related topics. A date for the next advisory group meeting has not been set at this time.
Thank you for that report. Danny, do you have anything on the interagency prescription monitoring program work group?
No interagency PMP work group report.
With that, we will go to F, and I'll ask Ruben to come forward.
Good morning. As a financial resource representative within the financial division of the pharmacy board, I will be going over the first 4 agenda items within the F.1 agenda items regarding financial updates. I want to start with the financial documents provided to you, starting with F.1.1, which is the agency's review of fiscal year 24's third quarter expenditures or the budget status report. This report reflects the agency's expense standing as of May 31st, fiscal year 24. The next item on the agenda is F.1.2. This report is the review of the board member travel budget. The spreadsheet details and reviews the board's in-state and out-of-state cumulative travel as of the end of the third quarter of fiscal year 24.
Okay, so I wanna make note before Ruben goes to the next. We are coming to the end of the fiscal year for the state. So obviously the travel for this meeting and any other travel that you have not submitted has got to be submitted by August the 13th so that it can fall in the right fiscal year. So just kind of make a note of that.
Thank you, Manager. The next item on the agenda is F.1.3. There were 3 items for consideration of materials changes to contracts for goods and services for the board to review. And the last item on the agenda that I'm going to be discussing if needed is the proposed fiscal year 25 agency's operating budget. I wanted to note that the proposed budget adheres to the General Appropriation Act. The left side of the proposed budget reflects the agency's appropriation as stated by the General Appropriation Act. The left side also reflects the adjusted agency's budget.
continue, on the right side of that proposed budget reflects amounts designated by expense categories such as travel, salary, other operating expenses, etc. The adjusted budget amounts are reconciled to the total expense categories or the total expense budget. And at this time, I'm available for any questions regarding the proposed budget for next year or any questions regarding any of the agenda items that I'll be sent to you.
Are there any questions for Ruben?
Ruben, on F13, Bamboo Health, explain to me the new amended cost. Is 6 million, 4 million, 10 million? Help me understand what that means. Is that an increase from 6 million to 10 now, or am I reading that wrong for Bamboo Health?
If you allow us our resource and to
So I can answer a base on this because my purchaser handles our contracting and I am not him and he's fabulous. This is a 1-year extension of Bamboo Health and that was an increase in the total cost of the contract, and so that included things like the NARCS care and the maintenance.
Is that a plan change or?
Yeah, so
Yes.
if you remember, the legislature gave us some enhancements to the PMP, and part of it, integration and all that was paid separately, but there were some enhancements that were not paid separately. So these were the planned costs that came out of what was given to us in the last legislative session. Sorry, Ann.
No.
You go right ahead.
I think the concern is obviously with fees, they go up every, you have to raise them and all that. Is this the kind of increases that we'll continue to see? That's pretty significant, it seems to me.
So part of the PMP costs was paid for through behavioral health, which did not impact the fees of licensees. And that was a month.
Like something to keep an eye on, I think, just trying to think about the fees we charge people, and stuff, it seems to be a challenge for people. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I just, the LAR that we talked about at the last meeting, where does that fall into this? Where does,
Not yet.
Yes.
So the LAR will
it's
have to,
coming in on the next?
yeah, it would have to go through the legislative session,
Okay.
and we'd have to see if we were granted any of the things that we requested, and then you would see them reflected here if they did go through. But we're probably jumping ahead a little bit, but I don't think there were any requests for PMP enhancements on this LAR, so I don't think you would see a jump like this, unless
Mostly-
something was given to us without us asking for it.
Yeah, mostly staffing, wasn't it, I think?
Those are priority. Any other questions for either Ann or for Ruben? So we do need to approve the operating budget, so I'll need a motion to approve the budget.
Make a motion to approve that.
Donnie Lewis has made a motion. I saw two. We'll go with Rick Fernandez as a second. All those in favor of approving operating? Alright, that carries. Right, thank you both. Alright, at this time, we'll have Sean come forward to give us an update on the LAR for 2026-2027.
Good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Sean Lieber, and I will be providing an update on the legislative appropriations request. That's what we're kind of talking about. The instructions for the legislative appropriations request for fiscal year 2026 to 2027 have been released, and we are slated to submit on August 16th. That's all we have this time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Alright, any questions for Sean? Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
Alright, so with that, I will ask, again, we've got some calendared or scheduled times in here. We'll go down to F.5, and Danny, you wanna take us through the goals and objectives of the board?
Yeah, real quick. So on F.5, if you click on that, you guys will see the 26, 27, FY25 goals and objectives. it's a detailed list at a department level. Pretty much what you're gonna see is these are in line with the strategic plan that we, okay, sorry. These goals and objectives are in line with the strategic plan that was approved here in February. So overall, the overarching goal really kind of goes back to the mission of protecting the public, the Texas citizens. Internally, what we're gonna look at is people. We talked about is staff retention and staff development, and especially with succession planning in place. So that's pretty much the gist of what you're gonna see.
All right, do we have any questions? Any comments? All right, we do need to approve the goals and objectives. If I can have a motion to approve. Rick Tisch, approved. Second, Randy Martin. All those in favor? Motion carries. All right, Danny, you wanna take us through the college pharmacy?
Where is that? F.6.
F.6.
Yeah, if you click on F.6, you'll see the 9, or scroll down to page 8, you'll see the 9 pharmacy schools in Texas. And we're required to, I guess, review and approve those at this meeting.
All right, do I have a motion to approve our 9 pharmacy schools?
I make a motion to approve.
Second? All those, the second was Rick Tisch, all those in favor? All right. With that, we'll go to F.7, and David, if you wanna come back up and tell us about the prescription monitoring program.
The PMP team continues to grow. We have steadily filled vacant positions. In June, we filled an opening for another review specialist, which was one of the 2 new positions that was granted by the legislature during the last legislative session. In July, we also filled a position for a data specialist. Next, I would like to highlight some of the PMP stats that were collected from the 3rd quarter of fiscal year 2024. These can be viewed on the summary stat sheet, which can be found on tab F.7. There were a total of 195,363 registered healthcare PMP users. 96.1% of eligible pharmacists are registered with a PMP account. 90.6% of eligible physician assistants are registered with a PMP account, while 87.7% of eligible physicians are registered. There were a total of 77.7 million searches during this quarter, of which 64 million were integrated electronic health record searches, which represents 82.6% of the total number of searches. The graphic at the bottom of the page, bottom right of the stat sheet, illustrates that Texas has data sharing agreements with 37 other states, territories, and entities as of May 31st, 2024. In June, we did reach an agreement for PMP data sharing with the state of South Dakota, which will be reflected on the graphic created for the 4th quarter of FY24, which will be presented at the next meeting.
Any questions for Dave?
Question. We had been doing audits in the past to ensure proper lookup and some coaching and education. Is that still a process, and have the results been satisfactory?
That is still what we're doing. We're still doing audits, and we're luckily, and I've kind of mentioned it in the previous 2 meetings that we mentioned the staffing. So we've got 2 people on board now to conduct the audits, whereas before it was kind of an all hands on deck type of scenario. So to answer your question, yes, we are still doing them. It is still education at this point. We're hovering at about when I looked at the numbers for November dispensations from November, December, and January. Each month was at about a 10% rate of, we were finding that 10% of dispensations did not have a query that was conducted. For example, to give you specific numbers, 10% for November, whereas 12% for December, and then January was also 12%. And again, that's a number that represents 12% of the audits that we conducted did not have, a query was not conducted, and there was no documentation of an exception. So I think I also mentioned it last time, I'm hopeful that once we can get more than a bare minimum of audits conducted, that we're gonna, my hope is that word will get out that we're doing them more, we're looking, and that hopefully in time, the numbers are gonna go down. But what I've seen, at least since the time I've been with PMP, the numbers have hovered, they were at 15%, I would say, earlier about a year ago at this time. So they've gone down a little bit, but I'll be honest with you, I don't know if that's sustained, if that's just a blip, or if that's, if we're trending in the right direction yet.
So you would think it's an educational coaching opportunity, or do you think people just aren't doing it right, or, I mean, because right now you're pretty lenient about just being coaching, educating, right?
Yes, sir. I think in most cases, I mean, there's a lot of factors that are involved. For example, as you're probably well aware, a lot of the searches that occur are the integrated searches. And unfortunately, just the way, the nature in which that occurs, a lot can, I shouldn't say go wrong, but there could be a lot of reasons why someone might think a query was conducted. For example, prefetched data is sent and presented in the electronic health record. So I think some users might be under the impression that a query was conducted because they're seeing a patient, they're seeing data, not necessarily the report, but they're seeing something that came from the PMP vendor. And certainly we're coaching on that, and that has been a long-standing coaching point. So I think, I mean, that's one of the things that occurs, but certainly we do see, and there does seem to be, and I don't have numbers to this, but there does seem to be scenarios where, for example, a relief pharmacist, at least when we reach out to the pharmacies, we find out from the PIC that the particular pharmacist that didn't conduct the query was a relief pharmacist. So I don't know if that might be a contributing factor. They might not be able to get their integrated search at the relief, at the site they're working. But there does seem to be a higher number of relief pharmacists as opposed to staff or PIC.
I think if progress isn't made over time, we have to change the strategy of the, not saying consequences, because we don't want to start necessarily doing that stuff, but I mean, you might have no choice if it's 10, 15 or higher of the pharmacist not doing the proper query, and maybe at some point, come back and have to do that.
Yes, sir. I don't disagree. I think, not that it would necessarily be my call, but I completely agree that it seems reasonable at some point to maybe look into stepping up or doing something different.
Appreciate it, thank you.
On other states, do you have any communication with other states and what their percentages are? Do you have any data on that?
I don't, in part because each state is different. This is a requirement, obviously, a Texas statute. I do know from, again, just casual conversations with some of the other state admins, that other states have similar requirements. But I'll be honest with you, I haven't really explored what, or asked about what they're noticing and what the trends are and how, what they're seeing in the states that are doing, that have similar laws. I don't know. That's certainly something I could ask about.
Thank you.
There'll probably always be a little bit of apples and oranges, because the
It's
drug
different.
list could be different and the rules different. All right, any other questions for Dave? All right, David, thank you so much for your report.
Thank you.
Megan, do you want to take us through the SOA cases?
Sure. So F.8 would be our appeals from the SOA cases and other court actions. And we still have just the one that you all are familiar with, so that's Light Care RX LLC's appeal, where whereas the pharmacy and PIC filed a petition to appeal the board orders that were entered back in May of 2022 in Travis County District Court. An attorney from the Attorney General's office has been appointed to handle this case for us. And back on August 8th of 2022, the OAG filed a plea with the jurisdiction, request for hearing, and original answer, and there still have been no updates in this case.
Thank you so much. With that, we will go to F.9, which is the discussion of the possible statutory changes for consideration during the 89th session. So Sean, will join us again.
Hello, members of the board. I'll be presenting potential statutory changes identified by the staff for the 89th legislative session. The first potential change is the reconciliation of the text of Occupations Code 565.003. During the 86th session, the legislature passed HB 2174 and HB 3284, both of which amended section 565.003(1) of the Pharmacy Act regarding disciplinary grounds for non-residents pharmacies. Both versions are in effect and are slightly in conflict and need to be reconciled. Second, regarding fraud, deceit, and misrepresentation, in section 568.003(a)(3) of the Pharmacy Act, for pharmacy technicians, the language differs from the language in section 565.001(a)(5) for pharmacists, because for text, the fraud is limited to seeking a registration. Next, during the 2021 legislative session, the legislature passed HB 1935, which added 562.0541D of the Pharmacy Act. This limits the quantity of an emergency refill of insulin-related equipment for supplies to the lesser of a 30-day supply or the smallest available package. Concerns were expressed that the smallest available package might be more than a 30-day supply, and the pharmacist would have to break the package apart. The words "lesser of" could be removed from section 562.0541D to address this concern. Lastly, there is potential to align qualifications of the executive director with those of similarly situated health agencies, as they do not contain the requirement for the executive director to be a physician, nurse, dentist, or dentist respectively. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Sean? Thank you, Sean. All right, Ms. Caroline.
Hi, all right, G.1 is your report of the closed complaints in the third quarter. So this was March through May. It adds to the ongoing quarterly totals for the fiscal year to delineate how the complaints have been closed. And the bottom chart at G.1 gives a comparison between those closed with some type of disciplinary action by the board versus complaints that were closed with something other than disciplinary action. And on page 2 of G.1, this is a comparison of quarter 3 with last fiscal year, and then the ongoing quarterly report of FY24. And then G.2 is your status of your open complaints. So this is most current as of July 18th, 2024, the open complaints by their agent categories.
Questions for Caroline about enforcement?
Caroline, has your staffing in good spots to be able to address these, or you feel good about staffing right now?
Yes, I have an excellent team. We're very excited to have some new investigators in the field. So that has been a positive improvement. We have some outstanding field investigators, but it's great to bring on some new members to the team, and to train them up. And especially in the needed metropolitan areas in Dallas and Houston, so.
Any other questions for Caroline? All right, Ms. Caroline, thank you so much. All right, so we're in a unique position in the fact that our morning agenda went a little faster than we thought. It's now 11 o'clock. Our first scheduled item is not until 1 o'clock. So we are actually going to recess now for lunch. Megan says I can go back now.
If you wanted to,
Could we do those without John's?
yeah, if you
Okay.
wanted to, right?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we could do H2 through
Through H5?
Yeah, if you wanted, unless you just wanna recess.
No, let's go, we can go ahead and take care of it. I mean, I was gonna put all the disciplinary together, so, Megan, if you wanna go through H.2, that would be great.
So board members, Amy has sent you the information associated with the items for H2 through H.4 in a link. That information has also been put on your laptops. So these are all of the agreed board orders, default orders, and remedial plans that have either been entered by the executive director or being proposed to you now. So H.2 is a report of all of the orders that have been entered by Danny. So these are the ones that you have authorized him to enter. And this item does not need a vote and is just for your information. So if you do not have any questions on these, we'll move on to the next part. So next up, we have H.3 and H.4. H.3 are the proposed agreed board orders and default orders. And then H.4 are the proposed remedial plans. These include both orders and remedial plans resulting from informal conferences and those proposed by mail per your previous instructions. You'll notice for the orders resulting from an informal conference, the chart indicates the board members who were at that informal conference. If you participated in the IC, we would automatically recuse you from that vote. So unless you have any questions on these, and I do believe one of our members is going to recuse himself from one of the votes. So he'll need to do that before we take it, but we would need a motion to approve the proposed agreed board orders and default orders and the proposed remedial plans. So we're looking at items H.3 and H.4. Randy, were you going to recuse?
I don't see it listed.
Perfect. So then we would just need the proposal for H.3 and H.4.
And then all of the other normal recusing is,
All of the normal recusing for ICs will be in there.
and so do we have I believe that Ian's making a motion to accept the board orders.
Correct.
Tish has made a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Alright, those carry. And I guess really we can go ahead and take care of I. It is hard to believe that it has been a year, but we need to thank both Rick Fernandez and Donnie Lewis for their service. And at this time, I will take nominations for vice president.
I would like to nominate Bradley Miller for vice president.
We have a nomination for vice president for Bradley Miller. Do we have any other nominations? Alright, seeing no other nominations, all those in favor of Bradley Miller for vice president, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Alright, for treasurer, we have a nomination.
I make a motion for Jenny Yocum to be our treasurer.
Alright, we have a nomination for Jenny Yocum as treasurer. Is there any other nominations? Alright, all those in favor of Jenny being the treasurer, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. So again, Rich and Donnie, thank you for your service, and Jenny and Bradley, we look forward to your service, starting the next meeting. All right, with that, it is 11:05, we will adjourn for lunch and be back at 1:00. So. I know.